Thank you for joining me. The Honourable Supreme Court's judgment on Bulldozer demolitions is a resounding affirmation of democratic principles, reinforcing the judiciary's critical role in protecting citizens' rights against arbitrary state power. By setting out clear guidelines, underscoring due process, and emphasising the importance of humane treatment, the court has taken a crucial step in safeguarding India's rule of law. This judgment is a reminder that justice must be guided by fairness, transparency, and a respect for human dignity, securing a democratic future where citizens' rights and freedoms are paramount. Here are 10 points to highlight the case of Bulldozer justice and the judgment.
You are listening to an Expert X presentation.
Point number 1. The Supreme Court took a firm stand against the use of bulldozers by authorities to demolish private properties of individuals accused of crimes. Labeling such demolitions as a chilling sight, the court condemned the practice, highlighting the arbitrary and high-handed nature of punitive demolitions. A bench consisting of Justices B.R. Gavai and K.V. Vishwanathan underscored that using bulldozers in this way violates the fundamental rights of citizens and tarnishes the rule of law. This case came before the Supreme Court as a suo motu matter, where the judiciary took notice of the issue independently, prompted by the mounting reports of bulldozer demolitions across several states. The court's observations reflect a growing concern over the erosion of democratic norms and due process when executive authorities bypass judicial procedures to punish alleged wrongdoers. Point number 2. Protection of the right to shelter. Under Article 21, the Supreme Court underscored the right to shelter as a core aspect of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, which protects an individual's right to life and personal liberty. Justice Gavai emphasized that a person's home is not just a physical structure, but an embodiment of years of hard work, dreams, and security. Arbitrary demolitions not only strip individuals of their property, but also disrupt their right to a stable and secure life, a right that should be protected under constitutional law. This ruling reinforces the idea that the right to shelter is central to dignified living and personal security. The court expressed concern that demolitions executed without legal backing violate the spirit of Article 21, warning that unchecked state power can lead to the suppression of fundamental rights that are the bedrock of a democratic society.
Point number 3. Separation of powers. Executive cannot replace judiciary. In its judgment, the Supreme Court issued a firm reminder that the executive cannot replace the judiciary or act as an independent arbiter of justice. By unilaterally demolishing the homes of accused individuals, the executive assumes a judicial role, deciding guilt and issuing punishment without trial. The court emphasized that only the judiciary has the authority to determine guilt or innocence, and bypassing this essential process violates the separation of powers that is fundamental to India's constitutional framework. The ruling underscored that executive actions should never infringe upon the rights of citizens to a fair trial and due process. Allowing the state to act as judge, jury, and executioner sets a dangerous precedent, the court warned, potentially leading to a future where arbitrary power takes precedence over democratic checks and balances. Point number 4. Due process and the rule of law as justice. The concept of due process is critical to ensuring justice, and the Supreme Court emphasized that demolitions must be conducted in accordance with established legal procedures. The court's ruling reflects the belief that justice should not only be done, but should be seen to be done. Arbitrary demolitions send a message that might is right, undermining citizens' trust in the rule of law. The court noted that demolishing an individual's property without following due process violates the basic principles of natural justice. In a democracy, the rule of law guarantees that all citizens are treated fairly and equally under the law. The Supreme Court's ruling stresses that justice should be administered through the courts, not through unilateral actions by the executive.
Point number 5. Distinction between unauthorized constructions and private properties. In its judgment, the court made a clear distinction between demolitions targeting illegal encroachments on public land and demolitions of private properties carried out as punitive measures. The ruling clarified that while the state has a right to manage public lands and address illegal encroachments, such actions must still follow due process. The court warned that bulldozer demolitions under the guise of removing unauthorized constructions should not be used as a tool of punishment. By underscoring this distinction, the court aimed to prevent the misuse of legal provisions intended to manage public resources from being exploited to target specific individuals without judicial determination. Point number 6. Guidelines for conducting demolitions with due process. To ensure fair treatment of citizens and curb arbitrary actions, the Supreme Court laid down clear guidelines to be followed in future demolitions. The guidelines require authorities to serve prior notice to the affected individual, specifying the nature of violations or unauthorized construction, and providing a clear basis for the action. The guidelines also mandate that authorities give property owners an opportunity for a personal hearing, during which they can present their side of the story. Further, the demolition process must be documented, and a report submitted to higher authorities. By implementing these guidelines, the court aims to bring transparency and accountability to demolition proceedings.
Point number 7. Mandatory 15-day notice period and videographic documentation. As part of its guidelines, the Supreme Court mandated a 15-day notice period for any demolition of unauthorized structures, providing residents sufficient time to make alternative arrangements. Additionally, the court ordered that all demolitions be recorded on video. This videographic record serves as evidence that can be examined in court if the legality of the demolition is challenged. These measures aim to protect vulnerable individuals and families from sudden displacement and ensure that demolitions are conducted transparently and lawfully. The 15-day notice period and video documentation are essential to preventing abuse of power and ensuring that authorities cannot act with impunity. Point number 8. Addressing the social implications and bias concerns. A critical aspect of the Supreme Court's ruling is its implicit acknowledgement of the communal and social implications of bulldozer demolitions. Reports had surfaced suggesting that specific communities were disproportionately targeted in these actions, leading to concerns about communal bias and discrimination. By emphasizing due process and non-arbitrary action, the court's ruling aims to address these concerns and foster a sense of fairness. The ruling serves as a reminder that in a democratic society, state actions must be free from prejudice, bias, or discrimination. Justice is meant to be equal and impartial, and the court's guidelines aim to protect all citizens, regardless of their background, from state overreach and communal targeting.
Point number 9. Humanitarian considerations and protection of vulnerable populations. The Supreme Court highlighted the need for humane considerations in demolition actions. Justice Givay observed that demolitions should not render children, women, and elderly individuals homeless. This emphasis on protecting vulnerable groups aligns with India's commitment to upholding human rights and dignity for all. The court's insistence on humane treatment during demolitions illustrates a broader vision of justice that prioritizes empathy and respect for the basic rights of citizens, particularly those who may lack resources to defend themselves. In doing so, the court reaffirms the judiciary's role as a protector of the voiceless and vulnerable. Point number 10. The verdict's broader impact on democratic governance. This landmark judgment holds broader implications for governance and the balance of power in India. By curbing the misuse of demolitions as punitive measures, the Supreme Court reinforces the boundaries that separate executive action from judicial authority. The ruling reaffirms that the state is bound by the rule of law and that governance must be carried out within the framework of accountability, fairness, and respect for citizens' rights. The judgment has sent a clear message that democracy is not about unchecked power, but about the responsible exercise of authority within legal bounds. The Supreme Court's decision emphasizes that justice is not merely a matter of punishment, but of upholding fundamental rights, ensuring that executive power remains subject to judicial oversight, and that the democratic values of fairness, equity, and dignity prevail.
So, that was yet another Expert X presentation. Please subscribe us for more in-depth analysis. Thank you.